This is Watch the Media. I'm John Shrader. We are joined this time around by a gentleman who is now in his 19th season covering Huskers football, 15 years now, senior writer at Husker247, part of the CBS Sports Paramount Empire. And we're going to talk a little bit of Husker sports. Michael, how are you, sir?
Not bad, John. How's it going?
Michael Bruntz officially. I'm good. I'm good. It's holiday season. So I'm glad I'm not an assistant football coach at Nebraska looking forward to Christmas without a job. What in the world is going on there? They ticked off another guy. And I don't mean ticked him off. I mean ticked off another on the notch. It's 3 assistant coaches who've been let go now. Is that right?
Yes. Yep. They're up to 3 now. Yep.
What's going on? What's this all about?
Well, I mean, I think you look at the way things kind of played out, and especially at the end of the season, and I mean, you could even probably get into, Nebraska's struggles in November, the last few years, which are pretty well documented. It's up front. It's the defensive line. It's the offensive line, and I think they feel like they've gotten to a point where, they've got it level a little bit in terms of the rockiness of the boat, but now it's how do you make that next jump? And I think the changes have reflected that. I mean, you had Donovan Raiola, who was offensive line coach for 4 years, kind of had his swing at things, and they're going another direction with Jeep Wade, most recently of Georgia Tech, and I think that's just kind of the way things are going right now. Where I think there's a little bit of you're starting to feel that pressure a little bit. You got to find ways to kind of make that next step, since it didn't really happen in year 3, and that's the defensive front and the offensive front are 2 areas where I think Nebraska needs to get better.
So I'm going to utter something from a past life when I covered the NFL and covered the 49ers specifically. And I recall something that Steve Mariucci, and it might have been said by George Seifert and others, is that we've got to be better and we've got to make our players better. And we need to coach our coaches a little bit better. We need to coach them up. What happened to the days of the head coach taking responsibility for the ills of the people that he has hired?
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually, going through Matt Rhule's comments this week, he kind of had a quick aside that I thought was true, especially when it comes to Nebraska's defense. It felt like you were kind of piecing together a bunch of different systems and approaches that didn't necessarily work. I mean, you had Tony White the first 2 years they were here. Running a 3-3-5, you bring in John Butler after Tony White leaves for Florida State, and kind of, you don't force it on him, but he was still kind of trying to run a lot of what Tony White was doing. And I think there was a little bit of friction in terms of the systems in the secondary that Tony White was running and what John Butler wanted to run. And, Matt Rhule basically said, I don't know that I put John Butler in a great position to succeed by doing that. Should you be coaching the coaches? Yeah, a little bit. I think it's also probably one of those situations nowadays in college football where you got to kind of be able to hit the ground running. And I think what you've seen with some of Matt Rhule's hires since he's been here, and kind of the repivoting to different coaches at different positions, is you have seen an upgrade in the amount of experience of guys coming in. And I think that's a little bit of a realization for him, is that, maybe what worked at times at Baylor or at Temple and bringing in young guys and bringing them along, which he had a lot of success doing, it's just a little bit of a different animal in college football now. And, I think having guys like Phil Snow to help some of those young coaches is a good thing to do. But you also need guys that can kind of come in and run things right away. And I think that's where you're seeing a little bit more of the pivot is you're trying to, especially at the defensive coordinator spot, you've brought in a guy that at other stops flip things very quickly. Like it's not you're no longer in a situation where it's a 2 to 3 year thing for, getting things going in the right direction. So I think a lot of that's kind of, a lot of the moves are kind of reflecting that sense of urgency a little bit more.
Didn't Rhule really understand that when he came here, though? He might have. I mean, I don't know how many times we heard, he's a guy who does it in the third year. He's a third-year guy, and he's going to build it. Well, you and I had even talked about this. The rules had changed even before then. The world had changed even before then. Maybe not as dramatically as it is now. And you've got to make sure you've got a football team in May that you brought in that can be up and running in August. But that's my comment. If you'd like to comment on that, you're welcome to.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a learning process with that. Like, I even look at Fred Hoiberg. Like, let's talk Nebraska basketball too. I mean, you look at what he did his first 3 years at Nebraska. That was, his success that he had at Iowa State was under a different set of rules, and I think that there was probably you kind of had to go down a path a little bit and learn it the hard way in some ways, and pivot a little bit more, I think, to maybe how things are now. I think there was a little bit of that with the football program too. I think there was, you look at the staff that they brought in, there was some youth at certain places where you can't have youth, I think. And you unfortunately, I guess in Matt Rhule's situation, you at least have the ability to pivot. Some coaches in the conference haven't gotten that. Jonathan Smith being one at Michigan State. So we'll see how it works. But I do think there was a little bit of an adjustment period and kind of coming back from the NFL and just seeing how things are working right now in college sports. It's a much different world.
Yeah, and I'm going to utter a few names here. I just called up the AP top 25, right? And, Indiana figured it out. Signetti might be an outlier. I'm not sure. But he had been at James Madison, and they're in the top 25. But go through the list. Of course, in the top 10, you have the usual suspects, the SEC and the Big Ten schools, and then Notre Dame. We don't have time to talk about that. But let's go to Arizona, 17th. Brent Brennan, 2 years out of San Jose State, is 17th in the country. Tulane, Houston, North Texas, Georgia Tech. These guys figured it out. These guys have all figured it out. Without the resources, I think I can fairly say that this university has. Again, that's a rhetorical question, but I think that the sort of argument that you're not making, but the argument that they would make, I think, is that the world has changed and, we have to adapt to it. Well, yeah, some schools have figured it out.
Yeah, I always bristle a little bit when people bring up the Indiana. Like I
me
think
too.
That's like the outlier of outliers.
Yeah.
And I
but
think
it's not a one-hit wonder though.
It's not. But even the schools that get pointed to a lot of times as having flipped things quickly, it's still, Lane Kiffin, it took a little bit of time to get that thing chugging along. And even last year where it felt like they kind of had things together, it fell apart on them a little bit. But yeah, I mean, you often don't get to reset the deck as many times as maybe what Nebraska has so far. And, I think in some ways the extension that he got in October, I don't know if it's if he has a mandate, but I mean, it's his program for a while, and I think we'll see if this latest thing works out, but I think there have been some lessons learned in terms of kind of how they need to build that staff and, the types of things that you need to be able to win in the Big Ten. I mean, you look at the Big Ten right now, I mean, it's basically 4 schools that are in that tier, that top. They're like like the Champions League top 4 right there. and
then the Europa and the
yeah,
conference.
you're just trying like hell to get up in that Europa set up. So it's they got their work cut out for them, because we're just what 2-3 weeks into the air quotes off season right now,
Mm-hmm.
and you still got portal coming up. You got guys leaving. This is whatever Nebraska is going to be in 2026 is going to be determined over the next 6 weeks here.
Yeah, yeah. And I think outsiders could look at it and say, well, maybe Rhule's sort of in crisis or panic mode. I wouldn't use that term because I'm not close enough to it. But I will tell you, and I looked this up about coaching and making coaching changes. Last year, the University of Utah, and talk about a good news, bad news for Nebraska in the bowl game. They get to play in Las Vegas on December 31st, but they get to play Utah, which is 10-2. So last year, Kyle Whittingham, now, a different story. He's been there 20 plus years, but last year they were 5-7. Last year was a disaster for Utah. He made one major coaching change, and now they're 10-2. So I think the story, the message, the tone is set at the top. And when you're switching and moving and firing and hiring assistant coaches all the time, for me anyway, I'm a tad bit older than you are, but in my history, that says as much or more about the head coach's ability to run the program as it does anything else. So that's, again, that's what I think. So
yeah, Utah is interesting too. I last year they had some pretty significant quarterback injuries too, that played a part in that. But I think too. I mean, in some ways, you're kind of chasing that quick flip in some ways, and finding. I think there's probably a little bit more of an upside, and maybe trying to find the young coordinator and getting in on the ground there of what they can do versus as we've seen at Nebraska across a number of coaching staffs, going with a coordinator who, has kind of been through it all, is towards the tail end of their career, or is coming back from, what's perceived to be a bigger job. So we'll see if they can do that with Rob Orich. But, you just look at the way the numbers broke this year. I mean, that you got to get something figured out on defense in a hurry, because you're not going to win much in this conference playing the way Nebraska did against the run this year.
Yeah, I think I think fans are probably still a tad bit unsettled because if they do go to Utah and the favorite in that game wins, then they're 7-6 for a second year in a row. We talked a little bit about the problems in November, but one tough November is not good. A second not good November is not good, and a third consecutive November is not so good. And the numbers are easy, and it's again easy to the slings and arrows are pretty easy. But this is a pattern. This is not just young defensive linemen who needed to be coached better in 2025. This has been going on for a while, period.
Yeah, and I think, their thought on the fix for that is, it's funny, like you're almost playing whack-a-mole a little bit with the way that the Novembers have kind of played out. This year you struggle mightily on defense to stop the run against Penn State and Iowa. And, I think probably, one thing you would have pointed to in 2024 is you didn't have a reliable enough running game to be able to kind of grind things out against those teams late in the season. So it's, November feels like those times where, especially with the way Nebraska's schedule always breaks, where you're playing these types of teams where every kind of small thing in a game is magnified much more. I mean, when you're playing Iowa, Nebraska loses 13-10 in back-to-back years, where it's special teams blunders, it's turnovers, it's the bingo card of mistakes that ends up causing losing football. And Nebraska got the special teams part of it somewhat dialed in this year in a big way, but you just got to find ways to play winning football in November. I think the being better up front helps you and makes that margin a little bit more in your favor. But, for whatever reason, and there's a lot of them, Nebraska just has not been able to win those games when you need to. I mean, and if you're going to, it's the difference between going to, the Las Vegas Bowl or the Pinstripe Bowl and being in a legitimate conversation for, whatever the college football playoff is, or at least being ranked in those rankings. So it's a small margin, but Nebraska has not been able to find that sauce that gets you there the last couple of years, and they just have to be better in November.
And oh, by the way, in 2026, they get to play Iowa again, of course, and Illinois, but yeah, hey, woohoo, they get to play Indiana, Ohio State, Oregon, and Washington. Wow.
Yeah.
The big four that you talk, well, three of the big four that you talked about, right? You alluded to the big four. It's Indiana, Ohio State, Oregon, and Michigan, right? Those are the big four you're talking about. You could throw Washington in there with resources and history and those kinds of things, but you could play those four teams and Illinois in 2026. Wow. I'm sure they're looking forward to that.
Well, I think that's why it was such a disappointing season. Like you had a schedule that was set up well for you. 27 is kind of the same way, but you always kind of in the back of your mind had this thought like you need to get some work done in 25 because what's coming down the road is going to be really tough in 26. And I mean, I guess you get the one positive, you get Ohio State at home. I guess Washington's coming to Lincoln. But I mean, going to Oregon, that's a tough one. You're going to have to find Indiana's coming to Lincoln. I mean, you're just going to have to find that's why that defensive hire, getting that right or close to right, is going to be probably the storyline of the offseason, I think.
Yeah, unfortunately, you've got Indiana, Ohio State, and Lincoln, two losable games at home, and I don't know what Washington's going to be, but they're going to be decent. We know that. You mentioned earlier about the mandate for the coach, and I've not made any secrets about this. I think extending the coach for $25 million for 2 years at the end of a contract was a misstep. I'll take an M word, but I think it was a misstep. I'm not sure that is the best thing Dannon's done. I understand the argument. I don't buy it. Right. I understand what Dannon will say about it and what Rhule will say about it, but I don't buy it. Right. The chances are in the history of college football right now that neither Dannon nor Rhule will be here in 2032. Right. So It's nutty to me. It's foolish economics. And unless Penn State had a written offer for Matt Rhule to become their next head coach, I think it was a mistake. So that's on the record. So there you go.
It was it's and also too, I mean, just the timing of it. Probably feeling a lot better about things in late October than you would have been if you waited to do it a month. It's interesting though. I mean, what's kind of come out of that. With the NIL piece and Nebraska basically taking less money up front, play fly to. I guess reinvest at their discretion, I believe was the contract. Word.
Or at Nebraska's request.
Direction. But I mean that came out of that. I mean it was an interesting conversation around that whole thing because you had Matt Rhule, in early October kind of saying, look, like we need to find some things to be more competitive, which I think is true. I mean, you look around college football and whether you agree with the amount of money that's being spent on players and paying players, your competitors are comfortably getting into the mid 20s for what they're able to pay towards a roster. So it's just an interesting discussion. And I think, Matt Rhule, at least to his credit, I think has kind of pushed Nebraska into that space, and kind of doing the hard work of doing so. I mean, I don't know that this is a place that's always, kind of willing to go there. So we'll see what they can do with it. But you got more money on the buyout if he goes somewhere else. I agree. When you start talking about coaches' contracts nowadays, it's almost like it used to be when you were talking about future college football schedules, where you're scheduling an opponent in like 2037. It's like, well, that I can't even like wrap my head around that. So, Nebraska's all in on Matt Rhule, and we'll see what he can do to kind of get things going in the right direction.
Yeah, you just wonder, the economics of it. In professional sports, and college football is a professional sport, the players make the money. That's where the money is. Andy Reid won 3 Super Bowls and then got a $20 million a year contract. Lane Kiffin's got a $12 or $13 million a year contract for what, 8 or 9, 10 years at LSU. Sounds like most of it is guaranteed. It just doesn't seem like it's economically viable, especially when your quarterback, your wide receiver, your defensive lineman, your edge guys, are demanding more and more money. Your point guards in basketball, your scorers in hoops, demanding more and more money at this time. It just doesn't seem like the economics of it are in the right place. But I'm not an economist, so I'm just an old sports guy who has an opinion. So,
well, but even leaders that go out and thump their chest about, we're gonna give Lane, or whoever's gonna be coaching at LSU, we're gonna change the terms of this contract, and we're gonna do things differently. And I mean, if anything, it swung the other way. I mean, they're gonna be paying the difference on his house if it doesn't sell for a certain price in Oxford. Like, I mean, that's that's not even what you were discussing before. So is somebody going to finally put a foot down? Maybe. It doesn't seem like anybody's running to the front of the line or to be the first person up the hill on that one. So I don't know. I mean, it's now you've got schools accepting VC money. Schools are making creating LLCs outside of the athletic department to get investment that way. You had the Big Tens, I guess do-si-do with the California Employees Public Retirement Fund. Like, it's
just not going to happen.
No, but I mean, that's it feels like that things are going, and I don't know that any of that's good.
Well, I honestly, and the reason why that ended is because Ohio State, Oregon, Washington, and Michigan, or whatever you consider the top tier, probably USC included in that conversation. Certainly USC and Michigan were the 2 most prominent, but others were demanding, what tier, how much do I get? I get more money than those guys. I'm not Indiana. I'm not Rutgers. I'm not Maryland. I get more than those guys. Of course, we're a brotherhood. Of course, we're in the same association. Of course, we're equal partners in this higher education, but I'm Tarzan and you're not. And that's the problem with college athletics. They cannot regulate themselves. More people are watching than ever on television. More money is available than ever on television, and they can't get together in the same room. Even conferences, let alone the SEC, the Big Ten, the ACC, the Big 12, whoever the Big 4 are in 2026 or 27, they can't get in the same room and say, this is what's best for the lot of us.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you can't even agree. I mean, you still have the ACC playing a different number of conference games than everybody else.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that seems like should be an easy lift, but I guess it's not.
Well, I don't know. We'll see how it manifests. A couple of things. Michael Bruntz, Husker247, senior writer, been covering Husker football for a long, long time. Emmett Johnson declares for the NFL draft. From what you understand, is he going to fulfill that, or do you think there's any chance he comes back here, or maybe goes someplace else?
No, I think he's headed towards a pro career. The running back spot, I mean, you know how it is. You only get a certain number of carries in a lifetime. Yeah. If you've got a chance to make that happen, you kind of have to pursue it, I think. And NIL, like, I don't know how close Nebraska would actually be able to get to whatever his numbers would be on a rookie contract. Like, just with the way you're building a roster, it's a little bit more, I think, of a kind of a pro approach for the most part in terms of where money is allotted now. And running back, is really not. It's not a premium position. So I maybe there would have been a conversation to be had, but I mean, he's kind of start doing the math on things and what he did this year. Like, I just don't know what the benefit would be for him to come back. Like, I think he sticks there. He's not going to play in the bowl game. So, that feels pretty final there.
Yeah, and I will say my exposure to Emma Johnson is more as a student in our journalism college as an ad PR major than it is as a football player, although I've had a little bit of exposure with him. And he's the top of the line young man. He's just an absolute first-class kid. And I don't think anybody from, Matt Rhule to anybody who's ever met the young man doesn't think that or hope that everything works out wonderfully for him.
I mean, it's a story that I think you can really appreciate because, you looked at what his offers were coming out of high school in Minneapolis, and there really wasn't there was very little to no Power 4 attention there. And, Nebraska kind of bet on him a little bit. He bet on himself to go and stuck at Nebraska whenever he was kind of buried on the depth chart. And, maybe shouldn't have been. So he's, a talented back. Like you said, I mean, you talk to him for 5 minutes. He's a really impressive person to talk to outside of the football stuff too. So I hope it works for him because he's definitely, done a lot of hard work at Nebraska to put himself in a good spot.
Yeah, and I'm proud of him. He's going to walk away with a college degree when he leaves here. He's graduating in May, so I know there will be a lot of things going on with the NFL in the spring, but I know he'll finish it. He says he will, and I know he will. Quarterback, Raiola is shopping himself around. Dylan Raiola, is he shopping himself around, and is he going to find another suitor? What's the story there?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a similar story to a lot of places right now with the portal and especially the quarterback position. You kind of, in some ways, I think you need to, at that spot in particular, it's year to year, making sure that everybody's comfortable with things. Not only the program but also the quarterback. I think those conversations are ongoing is probably the way to put it right now. He's in Lincoln. He's going through the rehab process after breaking his leg against USC, but a lot of moving parts there. I think it's one of those things that, Matt Rhule's kind of said, let him make whatever announcement he's going to make. I think, they feel okay about things, but, the portal doesn't open for another, what are we at? 20 some odd days. And, he would be a popular player if he goes into the portal. So kind of in a holding pattern, I guess, is kind of the best way to put it. But I think that's probably the case for a lot of quarterbacks around the country right now. I mean, you look at Arizona State, Sam Leavitt's, kind of, is he in or is he out? I think that's pretty common with a lot of kind of the bigger name quarterbacks is trying to figure out, what their situation is going to be for the following year.
Yeah, I have been for 50 years a proponent of paying college athletics, and I still college athletes, and I still am. I'm also a proponent in 2025 going into 26 of regulation of it, and if they don't do that soon, they are going to start paying big prices for it. A couple more minutes, Michael. You mentioned Fred Hoiberg. Don't know if you're prepared to talk about this, but as we record this on December 10, the women's basketball team at Nebraska is undefeated. The men's basketball team at Nebraska is undefeated. They're both in the top 25. In your opinion, it's not a close-ended question, but it sounds like one. Are they that good, do you think?
I really like what Amy Williams has built. I think when you look at coaches around campus, I think you have to be pretty impressed with what she's done. Not only, I think, in terms of being able to develop players, but also she recruits at a really high level. Like, let's not, have that get lost in things. I mean, Nebraska goes and wins some elbows out type recruiting battles for some really talented players. So it's good to see them kind of get things rolling. They play with a toughness and an edge that I think probably comes from Amy a little bit. But they've really got that thing rolling. And I think that's something that year to year that kind of builds on itself. So in terms of Fred's team, this is kind of the group, I think, where if you went back 6 years ago or 7 years ago, I guess this is 6th or 7th year maybe. When you said like this is what a Fred Hoiberg team kind of looks like, I think this year's team is what I would say. Like they've got shooters all over the place. You had a situation against Creighton the other night where you've got Rink Mast driving down the lane from the top of the key and kicking it out to a point guard for a 3-point shot. And, just that ability to have shooters everywhere, the ball's moving really crisp. And I think what kind of struck me too in that game, having watched a lot of Nebraska Creighton games through the years, Nebraska was so dialed in terms of assignments and what that offense was supposed to look like and rotation. Like you had like 8 or 9 guys that you knew you were going to lean on in that game. Guys bought into the roles, and Creighton for years has kind of looked that way. And it looked like they were just kind of trying to find anything in that game. And, I think this is the type of Nebraska team that should be somewhat scary to Big Ten teams because of the way that Nebraska can shoot it from the outside. I think they've got enough veteran guys that have kind of been through the rigor of a Big Ten schedule, whether at Nebraska or Iowa or wherever, that understand what you have to do to win in that league. As long as Nebraska can kind of keep up that defensive intensity, I think they've got a good chance to, be a tournament team. They would have been I think they would have been a tournament team last year had Rink Mast not gotten hurt. But it's guys that are really kind of maximizing their roles right now. And those are always dangerous teams when you start getting into conference play and you start playing games that matter in February and into March.
Yeah. And there's going to be a lot of people, and I know some who are going to be heartbroken basketball fans at Nebraska. If they don't one of these days finally win an NC2A tournament game, they remain the last of the big time, big conference, big schools to never have won a men's basketball tournament game. So maybe, maybe Kent Pavelka will be the happiest guy in the world come springtime when they finally win. And speaking of heartbreaks, I don't know if you wanted to comment about that, Michael.
The
NC2A prospect.
Yeah, I mean, it's I've got friends that have grew up going to Nebraska basketball games that would probably identify more as Nebraska basketball fans than Nebraska football fans. It's a different fan base.
Yeah.
And I feel for them a lot because I know going to Memphis a couple of years ago, a lot of my friends thought that was going to be it. And, it obviously wasn't. So we'll see. I mean, it's if they can stay healthy, they get Oogie back in a couple of weeks here with a little bit more front court depth. Maybe this is the year.
Maybe. And speaking of heartbreak, probably the biggest upset in sports would be if Nebraska doesn't run the table in the volleyball championship. They have been the best volleyball team night after night after night I've seen in a long time. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, to basically go through the bulk of conference play without dropping a set. Yeah, it's, the one that I know that Penn State is not what it was 5-6 years ago, but to go that match in particular, I was just like, okay, this team is built a little bit differently to go in there and just dominate Penn State the way that they did. And I hope that people also appreciate, whenever Nebraska volleyball goes on the road, it's like the circus is coming to town. Like all of these programs are setting attendance records with Nebraska on the other side of the net. And they're just unflappable with the way that they play. So, I would feel comfortable putting some money down on Nebraska volleyball versus the field in the NCAA tournament for sure. We'll see, if they run into a little bit of adversity, and I don't know if that means just dropping a set or what, but how you kind of handle that, as they get kind of down the line here. But it's been impressive, and it's been particularly impressive given the coaching transition and all the kind of change that comes with that too. I mean, they've gotten even better if that was possible after John Cook left.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned Amy Williams and the sort of fire in Amy Williams, who's about 5 foot tall and carries this sort of. And I think, despite the fact that Danny Busboom Kelly smiles a lot on the bench when they cut away on television, I think that same kind of fire burns there, and the players get it. They get it. Yeah.
No, I think it's I think it's fair to say it's a different tone at the top probably than maybe what they were getting prior to her being at Nebraska.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's not a bad thing.
That's not to say that the guy she replaced wasn't good, because
he was okay
fabulous.
too.
He also went undefeated and won a national championship in his first year at Nebraska. So there you go.
Yes.
As the head coach. So, hey, Michael, thanks. I appreciate it as always.
Anytime, John.
Yeah, Michael Bruntz is senior writer for Husker247, part of the CBS Paramount Empire. He's been with us on Watch the Media. I'm John Shrader.